Tonight, when I thought about national standards, all I did is I came from the position of having an education perspective, but also as a parent, and I asked myself 6 questions, and I asked those 6 questions, and I'm just going to respond to them as I see it in an educational perspective. Putting it in perspective, Balmoral School is a primary school and an intermediate school, so we have both the needs of children who enter us at 5, and we have a number of children who enter school at year 7, at age 11. So my first question I put to myself was, are the standards really national? And are they a reliable indicator of where students are at? So I think the standards as they're written are useful to schools as a progression and useful to teachers as a progression. And by that I mean they may be useful for teachers to use as where the next step may be, not definitely will be. Because people are completely different and everyone's brain is different and they move in different ways. So for a teacher, they may be useful for that. But they have been rushed. And the lack of moderation at both a school level, a local level, and a national level undermines the credibility of a national standard. I think the absence of this moderation brings into clear the validity and the reliability of the information that we would gain from them. Because everybody in their own little cell, classroom or cell, and every school in their own little cell, and every community with completely different views of how to interpret that standard. And that brings into that, answers that question. The second question I have is there a consistency between the standards and current assessment tools that we use in our schools? And the answer to this has to be there is no clear or consistent connection between the standards and the normed assessment tools. The normed assessment tools are the things like PAT and maybe ASTOL. So for example, when I look at our Year 8 children at school, the average PAT result in mathematics is a stay 9-5, from 1 to 10, 1 to 9 and 5 sits in the middle. And it has a raw score of 55. From the MOE's own website, we will be telling children who are normal, who are progressing at a normal rate in Year 8, that they are below the standard. By looking at the data at Balmoral School, I predict that I'll be telling 60 to 63% of my Year 8 students that they are below the standard. The next question is, will the MOE and the New Zealand community receive an accurate picture of where students are at? Well, the potential use of the data once again is flawed. I think in other countries where they've collated school achievement data that has become public domain, we have national league tables. I know in New Zealand there is no official decision to develop the tables, but the reality remains that it will occur. Every principal who sends in their data will be rest assured on national standards that it will appear by the newspapers and the media. We will have national rankings. And it's flawed data. The public will be making decisions on data that's completely flawed. We are a sophisticated economy. We should not be making decisions of national significance. And let's face it, our young people are our most important treasure of national significance on data that is flawed. In Ontario, we were told the national standards made a big improvement. What we weren't told about Ontario was that up to 95 schools opted out of the national curriculum because what happened was that schools got into grade creep. Principals wanted to make their schools look good. Communities wanted to make their schools look good. Principals wanted to make their children, teachers wanted to make their kids look good. They increased the grades they gave to children. They had grade creep. because there was no moderation. What happened to get into an Ontario university is you had to have a 94-point grade average. And of course, suddenly everyone's getting it. So the schools who were deemed that they realised this was inappropriate because the universities were saying, this is rubbish, what's going on? They opted completely out of the system and adopted another system. Moderation can only be achieved if we develop a thorough process like NCEA with external moderation. And that has taken us 15 years to achieve, and at only 3 years of schooling. We are talking of 8 years of schooling. Are you prepared as a taxpayer to put that level of money in to get reliable data? My next question is it fair that children be judged like this from age 5 up to age 12? And I've taken both age groups. I am concerned that high-stakes judgments are being made about young children who are just entering our school system. The focus at our school for 5-year-olds is to make them feel part of the school system. We work really a big effort in making them feel their place and they're a big kid at school. How fair is it to be labelled a failure or below standard in your first year at school at 5? We know in our school who are struggling at 6. We try to offer them already recovery. Unfortunately, we've had cuts in that area this year because we're a high decile school. So kids are going to miss out. Murray Clay devised a very good system for assessing children at age 6. We have that information to target our most needy students. What about the child at year 8 in their last year of intermediate? They might be progressing at an age-appropriate rate. However, they are told after 8 years at our school that they are below the standard. Will they want to attempt mathematics at high school? Will they want to attempt science? We know the emergent adolescent is a huge disruption, and we know what happens to the brain through brain research. I think it is a tragedy in our school system if my year 8s leave our school feeling that they cannot take on high school because I've labelled them as below standard. And it is wrong to assume that a child is failing just because they don't meet a standard. My next question is, will the reduction of standards lead to a narrowing of the rich New Zealand curriculum? In other countries, where there has been an emphasis on standards or national testing, there has been a narrow curriculum for all children. In Britain, although there's national testing, what we see is a focus of a teacher. The teacher focuses on a standard being measured. And what they focus on is that child who they think with extra work will meet that standard. Now what happens to those kids, those able kids who meet the standard? What does the teacher do with them? Busy work? What about those kids who are way below the standard? Do they worry about them? And do you think a term is alright for a child to sit in the corner of the room and do nothing, and only the 6 kids who are going to make that, who possibly make that standard, and make that teacher look good and that child look good? Is that not a narrowing of the curriculum for the rest of the children in the classroom? What about a narrowing of the other part of the curriculum? What about the narrowing of PE? What about the narrowing of social studies? What about the narrowing of science? Already in Auckland, we have seen a complete reduction in the services of these curriculum areas to schools. If our school wants a science advisor now, for primary or intermediate, we can't get them. There is no one delivering that service. So we have had a narrowing of the curriculum already. These cuts are only but a start. You won't see art up in schools. You will in ours, but but you won't have many unless parents get motivated. My last question is, will the introduction of national standards keep New Zealand where it is on the International League of Nations as having a high-quality education system? I think you all remember how Fancy, he was the last Director of Education before our latest one. He was also in Treasury when they brought in, when the Labour government came in 1984 and was part of that Rogernomics. What he said to me when he retired was that when he was in the Treasury and they did that big reform and he went to Germany, nobody wanted to see him. When he turned up in Germany as the Chief Executive of Education, he was flown up to meet the Chancellor because they valued what New Zealand was doing in education. Will that still happen? We have at the moment a world-recognised public education system. In international studies, if you want to rely on them, we continually rate in the top 5. We have a long tail, but that is exacerbated by the high numbers of students who are achieving at the top. And I think, finally, one recommendation here is we need to focus on more than just education to help our underachievers. So on reflection, I want you just to consider this by 6 questions. Are the standards really national and a reliable indicator of where students are at? Is there consistency between the standards and the current norm assessment tools? Will the MOE and the New Zealand community receive an accurate picture of where students are at? Is it fair that children be judged like this from age 5 or at age 12 when they're entering the high school? Will the introduction of the standards lead to a narrowing of the rich New Zealand curriculum? And will the introduction of national standards keep New Zealand where it is on the International League of Nations as having a high quality education system? Please think about it. Thank you.